Hello, my Teaserking family. How is everybody today? We are going to do week 9 of college football. I was up late studying it, and my friend in the Ukraine goes, "What are you still doing up?" It's like 2 in the morning. I says, I'm on a roll. I'm in the zone picking my college football. So I have a ton of games. I have 4 locks. I think I have 4 locks. Yeah, I got 4 locks. And I tell you the truth, I saw 2 other games I could lock, but I just played them strong. I don't want to have too many locks just because, I don't know, it's hard to lock 10 games. But these other 2, as I was reviewing them and looking at the line going, this should be a lock also. So let's quickly, why don't we go through the lines as of 11-11. That's a very lucky time, 11-11. Let's see what gold's at just for our gold family. Bobby asked an interesting question. He said, well, what happens when it explodes? How will we know? And I'm saying, oh, we'll know. Don't worry. Everybody will tell us. So, no, silver's still the same, $20. And gold's at 1663 in the fake gold market. Interesting. All right, so let's get to the lines. Okay. And it's funny is you still have to hit the reset button because even though you bring in the lines and you think you've got the latest, if you don't hit the little circle and get the update, I've seen where it then updates more so like gold price and stocks and stuff where you think you're on the site. So you think, oh, this is what it is. And then you update it and all of a sudden it changes and you're like, well, what the fuck? Why didn't it change when I got in? All right, so we've got 3 games tonight, of which I have picked 2 of them. And I'll give you the one. So we got NC State 13.5 and 40 roughly. We got Lou Lafayette now favored, -1.5, 42.5. So it was Southern Miss favored. Now it's Lou Lafayette favored. Utah -7, 55.5. Okay, those 3 are tonight. And I am playing 2 of those. And I don't normally play Thursday night games, but I can't pass these up. BYU 3.5, 63.5, up from 62. And LTEX 6.5, 57.5. Really hasn't changed. They play Florida International. This is tomorrow. LTEC, Florida International, East Carb, BYU. BYU is a mess. All right, so let's get to Saturday. We got Boston College 7.5, 45.5 to UConn. That went up from 44 to 45.5. I don't know who would be betting that game over, to tell you the truth. Miami of Ohio 8.5, 48.5. That hasn't moved. TCU 7.5, 68.5. That hasn't moved. Florida State 24.5, 47.5. That hasn't moved. Ohio State 15.5, 16.5. Hey, Nick, how are you? Did you get all I posted a lot last night. almost threw another lock in there, but you'll see it as a 15 unit. So again, Ohio State, Penn State reminds me of last week's Oak State game. Do I take Oak State or the over? And they both won, so it didn't matter. But I had Oak State as the dog. Here, we're figuring out what to do. Syracuse 2.5, 47.5 over Notre Dame. Toledo 6.5, 55.5. Hasn't moved. Oklahoma 1.5, 55.5. Hasn't moved. Houston 17.5, 60.5. Really hasn't moved. It was 61, 60.5. I probably just rounded it anyway. Arkansas 3.5, 62.5. 3.5. That hasn't moved. Miami 1.5, 48.5. Now in this game, be aware that Van Dyke is questionable. Excuse me. I don't know why I always sneeze when I sit here. I think I'm near a draft by the back window or something like that. Anyway, so Van Dyke is questionable with the upper body, whatever that means. So if he plays, I like Miami. But if he doesn't play, this is a great under because Virginia can't score points. Miami's got a fairly good defense, and if they don't have Van Dyke, they're not going to score. Well, that's why we bet it early, Nick, is the Raiders move. The lock, I don't think's moved. Well, we'll get to the pros tomorrow, but I don't think the lock is moved. And, the over-under lock. The other one I love. I just love the other lock that I would never have locked before, but this is such a good lock, I had to lock it. Rice 16.5, 59.5. Okay, that really hasn't moved. Minnesota 13.5, 40.5 against Rutgers. Hasn't really moved a little bit. Tanner Morgan, the quarterback from Minnesota, is questionable. He doesn't play. That's a strong underplay. Exactly what's like you're talking about. Me and Christopher laughed about it this morning. Yeah. Georgia State 3.5, 55.5. Georgia State. Where are you, Georgia State? Here it is. 3.5, 50. So it hasn't really moved. Sometimes I round it. So if I just put 56 in, it's 55.5. I'm not going to change it because you screw up. You can't read what you're written after 5 line changes. So if it moves a point, I then move it on my little sheet here. Illinois 7.5, 50.5. That really hasn't moved. New Mexico State 2.5, 38.5 hasn't really moved. Wake 3.5, 63.5. Gotta love Hartman there. I'm surprised that line actually went down. It's supposedly from 6.5 to 3.5. My line's 7, but fucking Hartman, are you kidding? UCF 1.5 over Cincinnati, 56.5. This game's got me like, really? I get Cincinnati in points, or I can go under. So I'm still debating on which way to go with that. But that's the beauty. Another advanced method is you go into the team and you see the teams they played. And when you see a like team, so if you get like an over team, which we'll get to, like in the Pac-10, you got all these over teams. So how Arizona's got USC this week. So you go, well, how does Arizona do against Oregon, Washington, Utah, UCLA? And then you can figure what USC will do to them. And that's kind of how you can gauge it. So in this case, how does UCF do against good defensive teams? And that will show you what to do. Or how does Cincinnati do again? Well, this is a running team, UCF. So you kind of gauge it by how do they do in a similar game, because that's what you're looking for is matchup. And you can't, if it's a different style team, you don't know really what to expect unless you can see it there, or you look in the history like at Ohio State, Penn State, you can look at the history and go, oh, okay, that's what I'm looking at. Hey, Todd. Got it. Thanks. I see some good overs and unders. UAB under, I don't know. We'll talk about that when I get there, but it's not one of my 20 that I've liked. UCF, okay, 1.5. Iowa, 10.5, 37.5. Northwestern, I don't know. The quarterback's questionable. Even if he played, I don't see how they get to 37 and yet a teaser. But I can't see Iowa being 10.5 point favorites over a high school team. They can't score. I watched the Ohio State game just to get the flavor of how Ohio State got to 54. And they were going for it on fourth down, not getting it. There was some turnovers. And basically big plays. Ohio State would throw a 70-yard pass for a touchdown or a long run. And it was just once they got them, then it was all over. And that's what happened there. Iowa. Okay, so Iowa. Oregon, 17.5, 58. Hasn't moved. Now, this is a game that's got me curious. You got Iowa, very explosive. However, coming off the UCLA win was emotional at home. Now they're on the road at Cal, who's a very good defensive team. And so you got to look at Cal, as I was just saying. How did they do against Washington, UCLA, Utah, or USC? Then you can get a barometer against Oregon. The only thing you can do with Oregon is look at them against Washington State or Oregon State, which they didn't play Oregon State yet. That's the last game, to see how they're going to do against Cal. I think they'll be explosive. I don't know if I can go over or under. I got to see how Cal scores. And this is how you break the game down. Well, is Cal going to stay with Oregon? Then it's an over because Oregon's going to put up their 40. The question is, what does Cal do? Or maybe Cal holds them to 30. Like USC, Washington State, and USC, Oregon State, right? USC 17-13 with Oregon State, 30-14 with Washington. They're in the 30s and the 40s. But then they go against my Utah, and it's an 80-point lock, and it wins. And so, what happens in this game? Does Oregon State light them up like they've been lighting everybody else up since the Georgia game, or does Cal keep it low scoring? And that's really the question asked here. So that's what you got to analyze. So you go to Cal first and see how they did against these other explosive teams. And the beauty of the Pac-10 and the Big 12 is you're loaded with these explosive teams. And it's pretty much go over in the Baylor game, go over in Kansas, go over in TCU, and go over in Oregon, Washington, UCLA, Utah. So it's beautiful because once you got it, and they're all going to play. Well, Oregon and Washington will play Cal, and they'll play Washington State and Oregon State. They're all in the north. But UCLA plays Utah and USC and Arizona. So they play those games. Anyway, so that's what you'll look at. We can walk through that. I really haven't found anything there. I thought about taking Oregon 11.5, but I'm a little worried. Cal with that defense, and then coming off the UCLA win, they're going to be a little flat. So we'll have to see. Maybe we take it, but so far I haven't. And then I look at that over of 58 and I go, fuck, 52 in Oregon's game. That's a very low total. So that if it was 70, I wouldn't even think about it against Cal. But you can see how the total differs. Against UCLA, it was 71-72. Again, they're playing Cal. It's 58. I mean, that's why you got to know the teams, and then you got to see a good over under that makes sense to you. SMU 2.5, 64.5 to Tulsa. 2.5. That number hasn't moved. Should be an over game. Both teams are over, but SMU, you got to be careful. SMU's quarterback Mordecai is questionable, so we got to lay off that game till he plays. If he doesn't play, we can't play the over. And if he does play, then it's certainly an over against Tulsa. Temple and Navy. This is a confusing one. 13.5 and 40.5 to Temple, who's got a pretty good defense, who doesn't score. Navy is actually turning into an over team. So I don't know what to do. Does Navy beat them by more than 8? He's at 13.5 to 6 to 7.5, which I don't like. Temple played a good game last week. So again, this is a hard one, but the over/under is so low. I'm almost thinking of going over 34. Western Kentucky, North Texas. Western Kentucky 10.5, 69. Line hasn't moved. Florida and Georgia. Georgia 22.5, 56.5. That line moved like a half point. And South Carolina 3.5, 46.5 to Missouri. 3.5. That line hasn't moved. South Alabama 9.5, 54.5. That line hasn't moved. See, these lines start moving Friday night. So if we get them in now, and that's why I do it now, I already know who I like. I maybe wait on his SMU quarterback. Is he playing? Or a few other quarterbacks. Are they playing? Cincinnati quarterback's not even listed, so he's playing. But that's what you're looking at. And then from there, like Kansas State's quarterback, both of them are questionable. Now, I'm sure they're both playing. And the running back's questionable. So they're both playing, or, you're going to get a quarterback and a running back, but they are a little injured. And they're all listed as questionable. So they're playing. You have to assume they're playing. But that's what on some of these games, like the Kansases, we keep looking at the other quarter, like the Baylor quarterback and the Oklahoma quarterback. That was a key. Jefferson at Arkansas. So when the quarterback, if he plays, it's a whole different team. It's a whole different score. Marshall 2.5, 55.5 over Coastal Carolina. This is a confusing. I don't know who Coastal Carolina is. They seem to have a lot of running back injuries. McCall's looking great, but their defense isn't there. Marshall has a strong defense, so where I would normally just tease Coastal Carolina and 8.5 as a dog, I gotta be careful because they're just not playing well. And this is what you look at. Maybe this is what you guys mean by eye test. It's like, how are they playing? And are they playing good or bad? I don't care who they play. You just go from there. Tennessee, 11.5, 62.5. That's down from 12.5, 62.5 to Kentucky. I'm going to make that my free play, I think, because the free plays have all been winning. Boise, 27.5, 42.5. I can find them. I hate when they change the order on me. Boise. Okay. Boise, 27.5, 42. Hasn't moved. SC, 15.5. This is the game I was talking about. SC 15.5 up from 15 and 76.5. Now here's where I talk about you're making the over way too much. 76.5. Now, as we said, USC's played 30, 40 total games against Washington State and Oregon State. Arizona does not have a defense, however, but I think this is more of a defensive total to not get you to play it. Now, again, this is not one you can go under 82.5. Well, maybe it is. It's hard to go 70 because if USC gets a big lead, they're going to run the ball and not keep scoring. It'll work. I mean, look at them against Utah. It was 43-40. It was 85 against Utah in a tight game where both teams scored late. And I don't see this being that tight of a game. I don't see how you can go over in this game. And it's just such a big number. So that's where I'm at. It just seems like such a big number total. It's very that at that point you go, I can't play this game over. I'll find better overs, unfortunately. But it wasn't over, but not at this. Again, the line, if this was 66, lock over. 76, I don't even touch it. So we let the line determine everything. Okay, you liked UAB. Okay, so UAB is 5.5, 46.5. I have it under circled also. Florida Atlantic with Perry was scoring and then they stopped. UAB is an A team, so they have a very good defense. Maybe it's an under, Todd. I mean, you could play it small under. I mean, We don't know what we're going to get with UAB, and then Florida Atlantic really hasn't scored. They're an E team, so they score mid-20s, give up mid-20s, and UAB scores and has a strong defense. So, yeah, the A teams normally you can play them under more than over, unless it's like Utah and USC are A teams because of their stats. But when you look at them against others, when you look at them against UCLA, they're not an under defense. They give up the 40 points. It's just playing the smaller teams. They play low, their totals are lower. And that's what you have to research when you come up with the overs and the unders is who did they play? Is it really is USC really an under? And you go, no, they're really not when they play Utah or when they play UCLA. If they're an A team, you ignore the under because not against UCLA, they won't be an under. Hey, Carter, good morning. Hope you're well. Michigan 22.5, 54.5. The over went up a little. Every time I play Michigan here, because they're the better team, they never win. So I'm not going that route. I remember locking the game about 5 years ago. Michigan got up 17-0 and then lost the game straight out or something, or 1-1. I was laying 11 or 12. You couldn't believe it. There's something about this game. Michigan State gets up for the game. So you can't play Michigan -16. We'll talk about the game when we get there. All right. Arizona State 13.5, 46.5 against the Z team, Colorado. Definitely looking to Arizona State here. Baylor, TCU. TCU is Texas Tech. I'm sorry. Baylor, Texas Tech. Texas Tech is 2.5, 3. 62.5 is the total. The line hasn't moved. Ole Miss 1.5, 55.5 against A&M. I don't know who A&M is. They'll hold Alabama to 24, and then they give up a bunch to Mississippi State, and then Mississippi State can't score on Alabama. And you're like, what the fuck is going on there? How do you score 50 points on A&M and you can't score on Alabama? Oh, my God. They kept going for it on fourth down, and I'm just determining going for it in fourth down and not getting it is a fumble. That's plain and simple. They had 2 turnovers, and they went for it on fourth down 4 times and didn't get it. They had 6 turnovers, and that's killing the overs. If they do it at the 30-yard line, why aren't they just kicking the field goals? It's unbelievable. I watched the end of the San Diego-Cleveland game a couple weeks back because I heard that the idiot went for it on 4th and 2 at his own 45. And I watched it, and the play was some pass play that you looked at it like there's a minute left in the game. Are you seriously not punting the ball down the field? You really are doing this? And the coach should be fired there. And the coach tried to explain, well, I thought if we got it, we'd run out the clock. That isn't the point. What if you don't get it? You've given them the ball at the 45. Absolutely worst coaching call I've ever. The San Diego coach is a freaking idiot. I don't understand this going for it on fourth down, regardless of the clock, regardless of field position. It's just not good coaching. It just shows me that these guys are like offensive coordinators, don't understand the game. I'm not sure they understand how to do offense. And you never do a 2-3 yard pass on fourth down because there's so many things that can go wrong unless you got Joe Montana. You can't count on it. It was unbelievable. All right. North Carolina, Pitt. North Carolina 3.5 up from 3, 64.5. That really didn't change. I'm confused here. North Carolina is the better team. Pitt looks like crap. UTEP 2.5, 52.5 up from 1.5. Fresno State 8.5, 40.5 against San Diego State. Which Fresno State shows up? They lit it up last week, but then they lost to Connecticut, and then they beat our San Jose State 17-10. Are they an under team? I don't know. The over-under is 40 in the game. Probably would be an under. UCLA 16.5, 66.5. up from initially 64. So this makes sense. Money going on UCLA. Again, the line is lower. That's why we bet it on Monday, because now it goes to 60. So I know it's going up to 66. I know the way these guys think. So that's why we bet them on Monday or Tuesday as soon as we can and go from there. San Jose State, 24.5, 44.5. I don't know what you do with San Jose State. I can't trust them right now. And Wyoming, 10.5, 50.5. Line hasn't moved. So that's your line. Now let's dig into the game. So tonight, Lou Lafayette, Southern Miss. I like Lou Lafayette only because they switch quarterbacks. And the new quarterback's name's Woodbridge. And all of a sudden, I looked at the quarterback stats. You can go on Yahoo and hit college football stats, and then you go and you can dig into the quarterbacks or the teams. I do the teams first, and then I do the quarterbacks. That's all I care about. And I look at it, and all of a sudden, this guy's 10 touchdowns and 1 interception. I go, hey, we found another Van Dyke on Lou Lafayette. Now, they were the dog, and I bet them getting 1.5. Now they're a 1.5 point favorite. I still like them. I bet small on these Thursday nights because the teams are all off schedule. So, and we'll talk about the pro game tonight. They're all off schedule. And so it's hard to really jump on them. But I think Lou Lafayette, Southern Miss doesn't show me anything. They're an under team. Lou Lafayette with this quarterback is a B team and should score. Getting the 7.5, I thought was no way Southern Miss is beating them by 7.5. I'd be surprised if Lou Lafayette loses. I would lay the 1.5. I think you're fine there. And yes, Bobby, I've got my avocado, but I got to wait to eat till 12. So I like Lou Lafayette. Even giving 1.5, you get 4.5 is fine. NC State 13.5, 40 against Virginia Tech. This is an under game. I don't really understand NC State laying 13.5 without their quarterback who's hurt. Larry is out. I mean, he's gone. So you got your backup. I don't know who he is yet and how good he is. If he's that good, he would have been the starter. So 13.5 seems like an incredibly high number. Over under a 40, it looks like an under. North Carolina State's got an outstanding defense. Virginia Tech is just an under team. They don't score a lot. Their quarterback sucks. They have a decent defense. This is all under. And then Utah, I have Utah 10. This is 7. It was 8-7, 55. And I went into so here's where I went into my magic, and I go, who's Washington State played like Utah? And, of course, they played that Oregon game, 44-41. Oregon won, the game I thought would be an under. And I said, aha, that's what's going to happen here. And when it gets down to it, Washington State's got some injuries to their receivers and their running backs. Okay, even if they play, they're hurt. And then you got Rising. And we saw what Rising did at the end of the USC game. They're down 42-35. He drives them the length of the field in the last 2 minutes. They score. He gets the 2-point conversion on his own. He's a winner. You'd bet on Joe Montana here. All you want is to win the game. Washington State's got an outstanding defense. That's all I talked about. And I'm really kind of leery about this, but I'm going to bet Rising and lay the 1. I think it's a good play. Play it with Lou Lafayette getting the points. That's your teaser for tonight. That'll hopefully start us off on the right foot on college. Now, I don't play these, Todd, on the 10 teamers or something because people could miss it, right? So I tend to leave the Thursday games off the 10 team teasers. But that's it. So those are the 3 for tonight. And those aren't my free picks. Those are just the picks for tonight. LTEX, then we go to Friday, LTEC against Florida International. The quarterback for Florida International, I believe, is out. Not that it matters. They're a Z team. They did get a big win last week, just to make it confusing for us. That's why you can't go 100% on everything, because all of a sudden the Florida International, the team that sucks, all of a sudden wins. And you're like, How did that happen? So I really don't. I think the game, I don't know what to do with the game. Both defenses are over, so there should be points. So I like the over 58 in the game, but I'm not really, you know, there's better games I can find. BYU 3.5, 63 against East Car. East Car's a B team. BYU, I don't know what they are. They're a mess. Let's call them an over team for now. I don't know. The quarterback's got a hurt shoulder. He's got a hurt hand. My friend keeps telling me he's injured. I like East Car as the dog here. They're good some games and bad some other games, but I think East Car in the 9.5 can hang in there. Okay, now we get to Saturday. I have Oak State 10 over Kansas State. Somebody needs to explain why Kansas State's favored here. Really, they're favored by 1.5. Over under a 56.5. I watched the K-State, what was it, TCU game or Baylor game, one of the two, and they look good. I think it was the TCU game. They looked good for a little bit. So in the first half, they had highlights, and it was like 28-10 K-State over. It was last week against TCU. And the game ended 38-28. They didn't do anything in the second half. Will Howard comes in the quarterback for the Nebraska guy, Martinez, and he looks pretty good at times, but I guess in the second half, he didn't look good because they didn't show any highlights of Kansas State. It took me about 2 seconds to say, are you kidding me? Oak State, Spencer Sanders just came back against Texas. The only loss was TCU. They beat Baylor at Baylor. I'm just like, you give me Oak State in points, thank you, God, and it's Kansas State. It's not even TCU, which I think we bet that would have been an over. And then I'm looking at 56.5, and I'm drooling at that going, 56.5, that's 50 with Oak State. But Oak State's got a fairly good defense. Kansas State's a very good defensive team, so I'm not going to fuck with the over, although I do like it. I'm going to take Oak State as a dog against Kansas State all day long. The cream here, Ohio State 15.5, 60 against Penn State. I've been tossing and turning on this. Do I take Ohio State minus 9.5? Or what do I like about the total? Now, both teams are A, but both are deceiving A's. Penn State's an A team with an under defense, but look what happened against Michigan. Look what happened against Purdue. Even the Auburn game, Auburn sucks, but against Purdue, as first game, 34-31. Then against Michigan, 47-17. It was like a 60 there. So I'm like, well, now Penn State can be explosive, and I think they're more explosive at home. I looked at the history, and these are normally high-scoring games the last few years. So I really like the over in the game, 54. When you do the math, it's 28-27 gets you a winner. And I got a hard time believing that Ohio State's not going to get 40 points because Penn State defense, let's go back to the Michigan game, didn't show up, and really their offense didn't really show up. They showed up against a very good Minnesota defense last week who didn't have their quarterback. So Penn State's capable, like the Auburn game, against the good defensive scoring. I think at home, I'm sure it'll be a whiteout or a blue out or whatever, or maybe the game's at noon. I don't know. Looks like it's at noon because it's high on the list. Normally they move the game down when it's a night game. So I think this is a noon big kickoff, whatever the hell it is. Yeah, it's a noon game on Fox. So that's not going to help Penn State, who needs the whiteout. I don't know why this isn't a night game. Anyway, so I think you go over with it. Even if it rains, I don't know. It's supposed to rain here for the Michigan State game. But even if it does, that really doesn't affect anything. It's the win that affects. So I like the game over 54. Do I take Ohio State minus 9.5? Here's where you get caught in the trap. Wow, they blew out Michigan State and they blew out Iowa. So therefore, the they'll blow out Penn State, but it's a little different at Penn State. The Iowa game was at home. All right, Michigan State doesn't have that strong of a defense. I think Ohio State covers the 9, but I think the over 54 is a percentage-wise better play. So we're looking for the best play to bet, and I think it's the over in this game. I think good luck stopping Ohio State, I'll tell you that. Penn State could pull off a miracle and play way over their heads, unlike the Michigan game. But that game's always a home game. If that game was at Penn State would have won it. So it's a homer thing. I think they'll play better at home. I think those Michigan State. Let's go to the Michigan State game. Ohio State wins like what, 45-20 or 55-20. But Michigan State still scored 20 on them. So that's why I look at Penn State should get 20 on the, it's at home, and Ohio State, good luck stopping them from 35 20s, 55s, the W over. So I think you go over. Maybe Penn State backdoors it's only 9.5. I don't see Penn State backdooring that, but I think it's an over is a good way, the way Ohio State scores, and they score fast and in bunches. So definitely don't want to bet against Ohio State here. So I think the over is the way. Houston 17.5, 61 against South Florida. South Florida's terrible, a W team. Houston, though, hasn't played as well as I thought they would. They are a over team. They give up a lot of points. Kansas beat them. So you're really scratching your head with this game. Over under is 61. Both teams have over defenses. So Houston should be able to light up South Florida here. The question is how much does South Florida come back on Houston? Over under is only 61. I think it's an over game. I think you can go over 55. Now look at the difference. Ohio State, Penn State 60, USC, Arizona 76. So you can see we can take Ohio State just 54 points. They're going to do that 99 times out of 100 with that offense. But USC, Arizona, what are they telling you? They're telling you, we don't want you to bet this game. We don't want any action on this game. They make the spread so high. How can you freaking bet it? Or maybe they're looking for under action. How the hell would you bet it under? This could be a reverse lock or a reverse fix where the spread's so high, everybody bets it under, and they go, okay, guys, score 80 points in the game. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But so you can see what Vegas is doing. They don't want any action on that USC game. And I don't know why. I think 70 would have been the right number. 76 is just crazy. Notre Dame, Syracuse 2.5, 47.5. Notre Dame, to me, they're an under team. They switched to Pike. He's okay. Look at last week. They beat UNLV. They finally put up 40 points against that. They don't have a good defense. And UNLV's quarterback, I think he's concussion. So where I thought he was out, he might be playing. Syracuse played Clemson 27-21. And the only reason it was that is they changed quarterbacks, Clemson. Why they're not starting this kid, it's like New England. What the fuck are they doing not starting Zappy? And it's the same thing with Clemson. Why aren't they starting this other kid who's like supposedly this great quarterback? When he comes in, the team scores. What are you playing for then? Oh, we got to play you Gobley. You Gobley must have blackmail pictures of the coach for the coach to keep playing this guy. He sucks. They only had 10 points against Syracuse. So what I'm thinking is Notre Dame, they got a great tight end, Dave Casper all over again. Syracuse, great defense. Both teams are Syracuse is an A team with a very strong defense. They'll be sky high at home after the Clemson game where they kind of gave it away, but it was still 48. This spread's 47.5. I tease it down to 53.5. I think Syracuse at home is going to shut them out. I think they're a very strong team. Don't fuck with Syracuse thinking they're not a good team. They're very good. Hanging around with Clemson, they had them 21-10. If they don't change quarterbacks, they win 21-10. So 27. So again, I like Syracuse, strong under team, like in Iowa, like in Iowa State, like in Illinois. Go under with them. Toledo 6.5, 55.5 against Eastern. Both teams are over teams. I think this is an over game. I like the number. I think it's 53, or is it 55? So here's where, 55 and a half. Let me kind of clarify this. So I think this is an easy over. Toledo will score. Eastern doesn't really have the defense. Eastern played Western, and it was a 70-point game, like 45-26. This is definitely an over game. Take this game over. So you don't fuck around. Well, I'll take Toledo minus a half. There'll be points in the game. If there's points in the game, why fuck around? Toledo minus a half, and then Eastern gets the upset because they're a good team. But you know there's going to be points in the game, so you go over with it. So that's kind of how you differentiate. Do I take a team or I take the over-under? Just like we looked at Notre Dame, Syracuse. I don't fuck around with Notre Dame at 8.5 or Syracuse and 3.5. I go right to the under because these are two strong defensive teams. BC and Connecticut, I don't know what to say about this. BC 7.5, 45. Now, what I've added is in my quarterback column, I've added a week, which means that the offenses are weak. They don't get a lot of points or yards. Well, I know they don't get a lot of points because I BC's a Z and UConn's a W, but their offenses are weak. They don't get 300 yards in a college game. It's ridiculous. So you're not going to get a lot of offense here. I can't trust BC to beat Connecticut. They've won 3 games. Connecticut is not really a Z team now. They're a B team. Anybody's the Z team. It's Boston College. But they should. This is ACC against the whatever you call the AAC. So I can't trust BC to win the game. I like the game under. It's 45. Both teams have weak offenses, so you go under 51, I think, is the play here. Arkansas, 3.5, 62.5 against Auburn. I love Jefferson. Arkansas, over team. Auburn's a W. They don't score in a weak defense, but they're starting to score a little bit. So this game should go over. I think Arkansas gets 40 on them easy. I don't know what Auburn gets, but again, Arkansas's defense isn't really going to stop Auburn that much. So that leads me to going over 62.5 here. If Auburn was favorite, I'd be locking Arkansas at 9.5 in 5 seconds. But here's where the wrong team's favored for us, right? We want Arkansas as the dog, not as the favorite. I don't want Auburn as the dog. So that makes me go over on the game. Georgia Tech, Florida State 24-48. Georgia Tech, their quarterback's out. And they got a weak offense anyway. Florida State, I don't know what to do with these guys. They're a B team statistically. They did beat LSU and then played Clemson tough, and Clemson kind of pulled away. Then Florida State scored, which we were waiting for them to do against Wake Forest. So we don't know what team is. I don't know that I can trust Florida State laying 24. As bad as Georgia Tech is, they played a little bit better in the last few weeks. So I don't know what to do with this game. I'm just going to pass on it. TCU, West Virginia. This is a very tricky game. TCU 7.5, 68. Not too bad. West Virginia's got a weak quarterback, which means he throws more interceptions than touchdowns. West Virginia at home loses to Kansas, beats Baylor, goes on the road and gets killed by Texas Tech. So we don't know who West Virginia is. We know who TCU is. They're a playoff team. They should be. Very strong offense. They'll score all day on you. But when I looked at the history of this, West Virginia's won like the last 6, which really fucks me up. But TCU's got a new coach this year. So that's when do I still look at the stats, or do I say, wait a minute, I got a new coach in TCU. They're explosive. They got Duggan, the quarterback from, I think it was from Baylor or Texas Tech or somewhere. They're only laying 1.5. I can't pass that up. I got to take TCU minus 1.5. Yes, it's at West Virginia. It's a 3:30 game, so it's not that night game. Baylor had them, but their quarterback got a concussion in the game. So if he doesn't get concussion, I think Baylor wins it. TCU showed their balls against Oak State. They were down and they scored at the end to tie it, to win it in overtime against a much better Oak State team. And so I measure this as TCU's gone on the road and won. And this should be, I don't know if it's going to be high scoring. I know TCU is going to score, but I don't know which West Virginia team shows up, the one that got 10 on Texas Tech or the one that got 43 on Baylor. Now, the fact it's at home, give them credit, they'll probably score more, but I got to take TCU minus 1.5. It's not a lock. It's not very strong, but it's like, okay, you're going to give me TCU minus. It's like Utah tonight. You're going to give me Utah -1. I got to take Rising. Here, I got to take TCU. They just scored too much. Even if they're down, like against Oak State, late in the game, they scored the touchdown that put it to overtime, and then they won in overtime. So even if you do that, it's still I can eat now. It's still, you got to bet. You still got to bet TCU. West Virginia, when you really break it down, is an over team with an over defense, which means with my latest concepts that are always evolving, I want to bet a team like TCU with a great quarterback against a weak defense, and that's what this is. The difference is the problem I'm having with Utah, Washington State is they're not an over defense, Washington State. They're an outstanding defense, which that makes it a little different. I would rather play the TCU against the weak West Virginia defense than the Utah against the strong Washington State defense. That's really the difference. But I like TCU. They're just, all they got to do is win the game. I know it's in West Virginia, and they don't normally play West Virginia well. But because they switch coaches and quarterbacks, I think this system will get you a win. And all I care about, all you got to do is win by 2, boys. Miami of Ohio, 8.5 over Akron. Over under 48.5. Akron was a Z team, is now an over team, and now they're scoring. And this is where you need to keep watching and making adjustments as the year goes on. And I always tell you, I'm much better now than I am in the beginning of the year because I start seeing a Kansas and we bet the hell out of it, a TCU and we bet the hell out of it. So I see the team and I go, aha, that's our team. But I don't know that in the beginning. Well, Akron has been getting better and better. They were a Z team, but now they're playing well. Miami of Ohio is a defensive team. They're an under team. They don't score. They just lost, I think, 17-13 last week. So really, I can't trust Miami of Ohio minus 8.5 against Akron because Akron's not the Z team they were. I think it's more of an under because Miami of Ohio is going to play great defense. And so we'll bet the defense there. So I'd go under 48.5. Oklahoma, 1.5, 55.5 against Iowa State. Are you kidding me? Not only do I think Iowa State wins the game, but I don't know where you're getting 55 points from. There's no way you're getting 55 points in this game. They played Texas 24-21. They played Iowa 10-7. They played Kansas 14-11. Where in the hell are you going to get 60 points in an Iowa State game? So this will be this is a free play. So this is the free play with the other free play I'm going to get to. Iowa State under. This is like Georgia under, right? You make it in the 50s. A great defensive team, but they don't really score a lot. It's a perfect under team. Oklahoma, believe me, they're not going to light up. If Kansas only got 14 on them and scored 14 in the second quarter, didn't score in the second half, there's no way Oklahoma is getting – this is not going to be Oklahoma in the 40s, okay? First of all, that ship sailed. They're now at USC, and this coach doesn't know what he's doing. And, yeah, I like the quarterback, but Gabriel's good, but this is Iowa State. They played Texas. I wouldn't play them over against Texas, TCU, or Baylor. This would be an underplay in all the games. And Oklahoma doesn't have that offense. They are an over team. But Iowa State's a beautiful under team. They're not going to light it up. They're going to score enough, like 21 against Texas, 24-21. That's about what I see here, 45. And you go under 61.5 in an Iowa State game. Thank you very much, God. Miami, 1.5, 48.5. Van Dyke's injured, as I mentioned. I don't know. He's questionable. Upper body, whatever that means. Shoulder, maybe. But it doesn't say shoulder. Normally it says shoulder. Maybe it's chest. I don't know. Whatever the upper body is, neck. It doesn't say. They normally say neck. They normally say shoulder. And they normally say ribs. Upper body, I don't know what that means. Maybe it's the back, but then they normally say back. So this is nothing we can do here. If Van Dyke does not play, this is an under because Virginia doesn't score. They have a weak quarterback. They're a good defensive team. Miami's been playing better defensively. But again, if Van Dyke plays, I kind of like the 4.5 with Miami with Van Dyke. But if he's out, this is an underplay. So we got to probably wait till Friday night. If we see Virginia go favored, we know Van Dyke's not playing, but the under is still the play. So you got to keep an eye on Van Dyke there. So watch your injuries. Rice 16.5, 60 against Charlotte. Charlotte's really playing. They have Reynolds, but they're just playing like terrible. Rice is actually an over team. They're actually scoring a lot this year. So hard to say. Over under a 60. I got both teams have weak quarterbacks, which just simply means 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, something like that. So that's what I'm looking at. Is this to be maybe an over game? Both teams have weak defenses, but they both have weak offenses. So it's really a game. Just maybe note the over, but you can't play anything on it. Rutgers, Minnesota 13.5, 41. This is an under game all the way. Rutgers doesn't score. They're going to run Ibrahim. Tanner Morgan is questionable. Again, if he's out, this is certainly an under. I don't see how Rutgers scores in the game. Minnesota, after getting buried by Penn State last week, should be pretty pissed off at home against Rutgers. The line at 13.5, I don't love, but I think the under 47, especially if Morgan doesn't play. If he plays, maybe you can cut 13.5 to 7.5, but Rutgers will play him a tight defensive game. That's what they do. So it's probably a best to go under. Old D, Georgia State 3.5, 56. Let's see. Old D's an even team. I thought they had this great running back. He got 300 yards 2 weeks against Coastal Carolina. Last week he got 100 yards, and Georgia Southern beat him. Here comes Georgia State. Now the difference is Georgia State's 3.5-point favorite. So now you're making Georgia State a 3.5-point favorite over Old D. I don't know what to do with that. I don't want Georgia State as a favorite. They're an over team. Old D's really an under team, but had that one game. So I'm going to leave this alone. Maybe you go over because it's Georgia State and they'll score and Old D will have to score. But if the running back gets loose, look out. Old D will definitely win. Iowa 10.5, 37.5. Northwestern Helsinki, just to stay in money heist tune, is questionable. Even if he plays, he's weak. 5 touchdowns, 10 picks. Iowa, we know, has no fucking offense and a great defense and a much better defense at home. You got to understand that. Iowa at home does not give up 54 to Ohio State. Iowa at Ohio State does, but Iowa at home is a whole different animal. Very hard to score on. Very strong team. So what do you do? The over-under at 37.5. It's such a low under, but I think doable with Iowa because they just don't score. And here's where you get skewed. If you look at Iowa stats, now maybe they're not their average got skewed because Ohio State puts up 50 points. But you almost take that out of the consideration where you take that away and go, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to I won't count the Ohio State game because Northwestern has no offense, right? So you got to look at Iowa against these type of teams, maybe in Iowa State, maybe Illinois, where they were they weren't even in the 20s. So I think this is an under game. If it was a little higher, I'd play it harder. 37.5, 43.5. I doubt it can get close to that, but we'll see. New Mexico State 2.5 against UMass at UMass, over under of 39. They're both Z team. Well, New Mexico State's a W. They did beat New Mexico 21-7. UMass is horrible, the worst team. Florida International was, but then they got a big win last week. So now UMass is. They're the worst team. They both have weak offenses. They don't get 300 yards a game. Over under a 39. This has got to be an under. Where are they going to get points from? Neither team really scores. A W against a Z. I mean, it's a terrible defense, but there's no offense. Both have weak offenses. So I think a game like this, you got to go under 39. So they're telling you it's an under, right? By putting the 39 in there. So I think you go under 45 in the game. Florida, Georgia. Georgia 22.5, 57. Now there's a whole big difference of 57 here versus 57 against Vanderbilt. This is where the under Georgia bets come in, is they're playing a team with a fairly good defense and a fairly weak offense. So I think they'll hold Georgia. Georgia will get in the 40s. Florida will get shut out. And we're back to, okay, let's take Georgia under. The reason against Vanderbilt, I didn't touch Georgia. I thought they'd cover the 29. That I thought they would do, which they did very easily. I didn't like the under in the game because I thought they'd score 60 points, which they did. And I thought Vandy might score because they look like they have a good offense. But so that's what kind of threw me, was Georgia 65-0, and you lose the under. So I didn't want to touch that. It should have been Georgia minus the 30 and teased it down. Here we got a good defense in Florida. Well, kind of. And Georgia, big rivalry game. I look for this 44-0 Georgia here. So play it under. Oregon 17.5 against Cal, over under of 58. This is tough because Cal's like Washington State. They're a good under team that doesn't score a lot. And Oregon, we know Oregon. So I looked at the Cal games against other opponents, and I derived that when they played an Oregon type team, and I know they got to play Washington, and I don't know if they play USC or UCLA or Utah. They got to probably play one of them. They play, the crossover, but I know they got to play Oregon and Washington. I don't think they played Washington yet. So I'm looking at the over 58. I think Oregon, as I'm looking at the score in my mind, I see Oregon in the 40s, because that's what they do against everybody except for the Georgia game, which shows you how powerful Georgia is to hold this team to 3 points. That's because they put pressure on the quarterback, and he can't just sit there, so therefore you can't do anything. Cal can score a little, not a lot. They lost to Colorado 17-10 in overtime. That tells you all you need to know. So they're not going to score a lot. Do I take Oregon minus 11.5? If it was under 10, yes. 11.5, it's a hard one. I think it's over. I think Oregon puts their 40 up or 50 up, and at 58, you need 52. Cal at home maybe gets 14 points, so I think over is the play here. I think when you're dealing with an Oregon, unless it's a Washington State or Oregon State, you go over. Cal's a good under team, but I don't know if they're that good, and Oregon really seems to be moving. And plus, they played Georgia, so this isn't going to scare them playing Cal. Illinois, Nebraska. Illinois 7.5, 51. Quarterback's fine. Nebraska has a terrible quarterback, Martinez. I think they're another one. No. Martinez is on Kansas State. Their quarterback, the kid from Texas. He's weak, 8 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Illinois should win the game. They're very strong. They're 6-1. They're a very strong under team. They have a very strong defense. Under 51, I really like the under in this game. Under 57, Nebraska's not going to score in this game. Illinois doesn't score a lot anyway. I can see this being 21-3 Illinois or something like that. They played some good teams and they just shut them down. They shut out Wisconsin, basically, who, put 34 up on Michigan State. So I think Illinois under here is a very good play. Wake Forest, 3.5. Hartman against Louisville. Cunningham is playing, but he's a weak quarterback. He runs, but he's not a very good passer. Over under is 63. I don't know if Louisville is going to score enough. Louisville is an under team. They don't score a lot. They played Syracuse, lost like 27-7. So they're not really a dynamic team. Wake we saw against Clemson, and we saw them at Florida State. They should have beat Clemson. It went to overtime, and then they did handle Florida State. I like them against Louisville. The spread at 3.5. I got them by 7. It's only 3.5. You get Wake in 2.5. Take Wake in 2.5. Hartman, like Rising, like TCU, will win the game, and you're getting 2.5. Interesting one. Navy 13.5, 40.5 against Temple. Temple, pretty strong defensive team, a very weak offensive team. Navy, who appears to be an under team, does get a strong, it seems to be becoming an over, right? So Navy, the last 3 games, has scored like 35 points. They, SMU was 40-34. Houston last week, we bet them over, was 50-20 or whatever. What the fuck's going on here? Oh, this is okay. Who wants me? Okay. My Romanian friend wants money. Big surprise. So Navy, they're pretty much an over team. I don't know what they'll do against Temple. So it's 40.5, 34. I think Navy, I don't know. I don't know what Temple's going to do here, how much they'll score. They played last week against, who did they play? They played pretty good. I think it was Tulsa or somebody, some good team. Yeah, you see it now, week 8. So Temple played Tulsa. Yeah, 27-16. So they kept it low, and then Tulsa pulled away at the end. You got a 43 on Tulsa. Doesn't bode well for Navy. Well, here you go over 34. Or you go under 46. It's kind of a low number. But after kind of holding Tulsa, who's a very explosive team, as explosive as Navy is, it's a real tough one. I wouldn't lay 7.5 with Navy against Temple. Who knows? So really, I don't know, maybe a little bit of an over, even though they're kind of under teams. But the line at 40, go over 34. I think they'll get there. UCF 1.5, 55.5 against Cincinnati. How is Cincinnati the dog here? As far as I know, the quarterback's playing. They need the game. I got them by 7. Somehow UCF's favored. This is like the Oak State game last week. How the hell is Texas a 7-point favorite at Oak State? Oak State wins the game by 10. I could not understand that line. I can't understand this line, except for it is at UCF, where that game was at Oak State. You made them a home dog. So here, UCF 1.5, over under 56. UCF can be explosive. I got them both as A teams statistically. Cincinnati, very strong. I think Cincinnati and 7.5 is a very good play here. UCF, I mean, they're not going to get explosive on Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got a very strong defense. So I either go under 62 or I take Cincy as the dog. Check for injuries. Although the quarterback he's not even on the list. He's been hurt, Bryant, but he's not on the list. I assume he's playing. All these guys with the concussions, they sit out a game. The next week they're fine. It's so stupid. Western Kentucky, 10.5, 69 against North Texas. Western Kentucky has not been as explosive as you think they normally are. Western Kentucky, normally it's like 40 to 30 games, and they're not doing that. They're playing a little bit more under games. North Texas, very explosive. They're the over team in the North Texas, Texas State, UTSA, all that good stuff. I don't know. I mean, I got Western Kentucky as an A, and I got North Texas as an over, which means probably should play Western Kentucky minus the 4.5 against the weak defense. Can you take North Texas in 16.5? Probably. I think they'll score. Over under a 69, I think it's too high to play in this game. I don't. Do I go over 63? I think it's a big number. I think Western Kentucky's just not playing those long, big scoring games like Utah, USC, and UCLA are. So get away from this game. Maybe if you want, play Western Kentucky minus the 4. Well, this is how confusing this game is. I would still like North Texas in 16 because they're explosive, and even if they get down, they'll score. And I doubt Western Kentucky's that strong of an under. So that's where it gets mixed in. The Division II games, the weaker teams. Oh, you played UMass. And then how did you look against UTSA? And that's really what you look at. You kind of don't even look at them as an under. You go, how did they do against UTSA? And that score is what you take here. SMU, 2.5, 64 against Tulsa, over and over. This is an over game. However, Mordecai, the quarterback of SMU, is questionable. I think it's a concussion. If he doesn't play, just forget it. If he plays, this is absolutely an over. This should be a very high sin. It's a nice over at 64. You just go over 58. 58, you got to figure this to be a 30-point game, which puts it at 60. Here it's 58. So, and that's 30 to 30. You got to figure 35, 32 is a 67. So all you need is 58 with these teams. So as long as Mordecai plays, it's an over. If he doesn't, then we don't know the backup. I'm sure he's probably a very good quarterback because he's at SMU and they know how to recruit good quarterbacks. So he'd probably still be good. But if Mordecai plays, it's definitely an over. South Alabama, 9.5 over Ark State, 55 is the total. South Alabama is a B team. Again, they went to UCLA. They've had some other tussle, some weak games, so they're confusing. Arkansas State's an over team, but sometimes they don't show up. 55 is a low total in an Arkansas State game, so not sure what you do with this one. I kind of just left it alone. I guess if you needed to play it, I would probably take the game over. South Alabama does have a strong defense, so you don't want to play an over into a strong defense, so then play it over. South Carolina, 3.5, 47 against Missouri. Missouri was the one that held Georgia to like 10 points until late in the fourth quarter, and Georgia beat them 26-22. South Carolina, Rattler's terrible. He's 5 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I don't know what they did last week. They beat A&M. I don't know what's going on with A&M. This to me is an under game. I mean, both have good defenses. South Carolina's got no offense. Missouri really doesn't have an offense. And you got a 47. So you got a nice under where we're looking at Iowa 37, right? Oh, man, that they can get over 43, but 47 to get over 53, that's a whole different animal. That's a couple more touchdowns with weak offensive teams and strong defensive teams. The only way you do it is if Rattler throws 3 pick sixes, or if the morons go 4th and 1 at their own 20, which I'm starting to see too much, which is making me just, what the fuck are these teams doing? And I saw it in a highlight last week. I think Iowa did it at Ohio State. I think it was at the 29, and I know Mississippi State did it against Alabama at their 29-yard line. Well, yeah, it's only Alabama, not a problem going 4th and 1. That'll be easy, and then they don't get it. Alabama scores 2 plays later, the game's over. So that's what you think. So I don't know. If they don't go for 4th down at their own 20s, this game should be under. USC, 15.5, 76 and the over. this will be very high scoring, but yeah, I'm not teasing over 70. No, no, in the 60s, low 60s. I think SC wins. I looked at the Arizona playing other strong teams, and they get murdered. I think they played Utah, and I think they played Oregon or Washington, and they just got crushed. So they can score, but USC's got a fairly good defense. USC's coming off of the loss to Utah, so look for USC. Really in a must-win game here. If they have any hopes of winning, they got to win the Pac-10. Right now, it's Utah with the loss, UCLA with the loss, USC with the loss. Oregon's the only undefeated team there. So with that said, you got to like USC minus 9.5. Hey, Christopher, how are you today? So I like USC minus the 9.5 way more than I like over 76.5. Are you kidding me? Way too many points. Marshall, 2.5, 55 against Coastal Carolina. And I don't know what's going on with Coastal Carolina. McCall still looks great. He's still playing superstar, but they got like 3 running backs out. And so I think they're just one-dimensional. They are an over team, but their defense is weak. Against Marshall, laying the 2.5. Marshall beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. They're at home. I don't know what to do here. I think it's an under 55. You go under 61. Marshall doesn't score that much. I know Coastal Carolina gave up 100 to Old Dominion because the guy ran for 300 yards. See, there is the running back that good, or is Coastal Carolina that bad? So if their defense is that bad, look for Marshall to run the ball, keep McCall off the field. I like the game under 61. I'm not taking Coastal Carolina at 8.5 the way they're playing now. You can't play a bad defensive team in a teaser. You just got to play the game over. You can play the good defensive teams in a teaser, but not the bad ones. That's where you lose. You play against the weak defense, and they don't stop anybody. That's like the North Carolina Duke game. We got away with it, but I had North Carolina -1, but they don't have that strong of a defense. They're an over defense, and Duke kept scoring, and finally we got a miracle with the end where they missed the field goal, and North Carolina won. But lesson learned, Duke's a good team. They can score, and you got a weak defense, so you got to be careful about betting on straight the team with the weak defense. You can go over on the game, but you can't. It's hard to play the team. UAB 5.5, 47. UAB is an A team. Florida Atlantic is an even team, 25-25 offense, defense. UAB 5.5. We talked about the over-under of 47. Probably an under. UAB, strong defense. Yeah, I could see it being an under. I don't love it, but yeah, I guess that's the way to play the game. I wouldn't take Florida Atlantic going against a strong defense like UAB. Boise, Colorado State, Boise 27.5. Boise can't score 27.5 points. Over under 53. This is an under. Boise, weak offense, strong defense, weak quarterback. Colorado State, a weak offense. They don't get 300 yards. They're the Z team, but I can't lay 27 points with Boise, who can't score. So this is only an under. It's 43-49. It's kind of a low under, so be careful with it. Here's the second free game to go with the Iowa State under is Kentucky, Tennessee. Tennessee's 11.5, 62.5. This took me all of 5 seconds to decide to go over in the game. We saw what Tennessee did to Alabama. We saw what Tennessee did to LSU. Why am I going over? Because I saw what they did against Florida. Tennessee, against kind of a weak defense of Florida, a weak offense of Florida, played a 38-35 game. So Tennessee will score on anybody because they just did. They scored on Alabama. The true test would be Georgia, but they scored 50 points on Alabama. So they're going to score 40 easily on Kentucky. Kentucky, I like. I like them. They're very good. They're a solid B team. They don't score a ton, but you can score on Tennessee. Tennessee's the A team, but they score 50 a game. The over-under is 62. All I need is 56. versus USC where you need 76. Here I need, so 76, I teased to 70. I need 70 in a game. Here I need 56 with the most explosive team in the country that just laid a 52 on Alabama. And then they follow that up with a 67 on Tennessee Martin, who, again, is a high school team, but against Kentucky at home, they're going to light it up. They might cover the 56 by themselves. Kentucky with Levis can score. Tennessee's kind of a little weak. They're not strong defensively. So I look at this game to be 50 to 27, 50 to 30, get into the 80s, 56. It's a joke. Take that. There's your free game. The Oklahoma-Iowa State game will never get close to 60, and this game will be in the 80s, Tennessee, Kentucky. So go over in this game. Michigan, Michigan State, Michigan 22.5, 54.5. This over has been going up. I like the game over. I am not playing Michigan minus 16 against Michigan State. They never cover. So if we look at now, what am I drawing my conclusions from the Ohio State game? Here's Ohio State, very strong team. Final score, Ohio State 45, Michigan State gets 20. Michigan State puts up 20 on Ohio State. They put up 20 on Michigan. Michigan will put up their 40. It's a 60. I got a 54 down to 48. This is almost like halftime, right? 48, 28 to 20, and I'm there. And I guarantee you Michigan puts up 40, and I guarantee you Michigan State puts up in the 20s. That makes it a 60 to 70 point game, and we're laying 48. Again, it's the number that makes the play being so low, and I don't know why it's so low. Michigan gave up points to Maryland. They played Iowa, which you can't count because they don't have an offense. Penn State, okay, they kind of dominated Penn State, but Michigan State played Ohio State well. And after you see Ohio State and you go, oh, okay, yeah, they're really good, but we played against them. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's Michigan. They're going to pull out every trick play. They're going to go for fourth down, which we want in this case. And then Michigan will run the ball. That's what they do. But this should be a very high scoring game. It's supposed to rain here, but it's in a big bowl. It's like 200 feet in the ground. So, if it's windy, you won't even feel the wind because you're in a basement basically. So not really worried about that. I got to stay away. I'm not taking Michigan minus 16, and it'll never cover. So play over 48. It's ridiculous. That's way too low. This should be a 60 point. This should be no different than Kentucky, Tennessee. Michigan puts up their 40. Michigan State puts up their 20. They beat Wisconsin 34-28, I think, in overtime, or 38-30. So they scored 30 on a Wisconsin team that normally has a good defense, and on Ohio State. The last comment I want to make about Tennessee, the comment I just made, Michigan State, they played Ohio State. After playing them, anybody else looks like, a high school team. Tennessee puts up 52 on Alabama. Believe me, after doing that, they have no worry. Well, we put up 52 on Alabama. We're going to put up 52 on Kentucky. The only team they got to worry about is Georgia, which they play, I believe, next week. I don't think they'll look ahead. Well, they could, but I hope they don't. But I don't really love the 5.5, but I think it'll be explosive. They know they did it to Alabama. They'll do it to Kentucky, who certainly doesn't have the defense of an Alabama. And they made Alabama look silly. So once you do that to Alabama and you go, it's Kentucky, and in your mind you go, oh, shit, we put up 50 on Alabama, even if things go wrong a little bit. But I love this hooker, and they do these very quick drives, excellent long passer, and boom, 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 3 plays, 2 minutes, touchdown. And they'll do that all day. So that's the point. Once you play in Alabama and you beat them, then you get that confidence. Okay, Mississippi A&M. Mississippi's 1.5, 55. I have no idea. Mississippi A&M. I mean, who the hell's A&M? They almost beat Alabama, and then they get killed by Old Mississippi State. Mississippi gets killed last week by LSU. I have no idea. This would be an under normally because A&M with a good defense and a weak offense. Mississippi's got a good defense. So I would say if you really need to play the game, it's an under. Baylor. I got Baylor laying 10 to Texas. Texas Tech's a 3-point favorite. Can somebody explain this to me? You got the wrong team favorite again. This took me all of 2 seconds as soon as I saw the line going, well, I got to take Baylor in 9. This is, the over-under is what, 62? I'm not even looking at that. That's probably a good over. But you've made it. Baylor should be at least a 7-point favorite in the game. Then I'd probably go over in it. Texas Tech beat Texas 34-31. Baylor lost to Oak State in a close game. And they lost another game very close. But Baylor, you get Baylor in 9. It's such a good bet. I mean, we know how strong Baylor is. They got a good running back again, and the quarterback's good. They're not as strong as last year, but when I'm looking at the numbers, like I looked at the numbers last week. Oh, yeah, they lost at West Virginia by 3 because the quarterback got hurt. If he doesn't get hurt, they beat West Virginia. So I'm not worried about Texas Tech. They don't really have that strong of a defense. Baylor is the A team here. So, again, we're not going against this strong defense, and we're getting points, and we're getting more than a touchdown. So you got to love Baylor here. Arizona State, Colorado. Arizona State 13.5. Arizona State's an E team. So they scored 25, give up 25. I kind of called their defense a little bit of an over. Colorado's the Z team here, although they did beat Cal, which makes me like Oregon a little bit more that they lost to Colorado. 13.5. I think you got to go with Arizona State here just because they're playing Colorado. They seem to be okay. They're scoring. They don't have a great defense, but neither does Colorado. So, again, I think I'd rather play Oregon at 11.5, although Arizona State here, 7.5 against the Z team should pound them. We had Arizona against Colorado, and they beat them by 30. So I think Arizona State, like they're salivating, like, oh, we can beat this team. This team sucks worse than we do. North Carolina, 3.5, 64 to Pitt. Slovis is not playing well. I don't know what's wrong, if it's just the system or what. We know he's better than this. He's got more interceptions than touchdowns. He's just not playing well. We know North Carolina is very explosive. Their defense got a lot better. They did come back at the end to beat Duke. 3.5 here is a tough line. Pitt, I don't know how good or bad Pitt is. They played a good game last week. I really don't know what to do with that. I guess maybe it's an over. 64 is doable, over 58. Pitt should score on North Carolina like Duke did. North Carolina, we know, is explosive. I don't really trust North Carolina plus 2.5 to win at Pitt because I don't know who. Pitt's kind of inconsistent right now, and they might show up. They might not want to be a dog, and they might win the game, but then they'll should be scoring. So I think you got to play the game over. Tennessee versus Kentucky is a big rivalry, too. I doubt they look past it. Yeah. Well, I know they're big. I know Tennessee Vanderbilt's a big rivalry, but that makes it even more of an over because Kentucky will do everything. It's like Michigan State, where Michigan State might not take chances against Michigan. They're going to take chances. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to score more, and that's what I'm anticipating with Kentucky also. UTEP 2.5, 52 against Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee's an over team. UTEP is an E team with a bad defense. I think 52. UTEP's got a weak quarterback, so this is a weak favorite. Quarterback throws a lot of picks, a lot more picks than touchdowns. Middle Tennessee's an over team. Both have over defenses. So I think here's a case where you take Middle Tennessee in 8.5 because they got a weak favorite, right? UTEP doesn't really score much, and their quarterback turns it over. And here's Middle Tennessee that scores a lot, so they're an over team. So I look for Middle Tennessee and the 8.5 to cover here. Fresno State, San Diego State. Fresno State 8.5 and 40. San Diego State with a weak offense. They're an under team, strong defense. Fresno State, strong defense, score in the mid-20s with Haener. Now, Haener's not there. The reserve, the backup looked bad. Then he got a little bit better, lost to Connecticut, beat San Jose State. They're at home. I can't trust Fresno State to win, but I would think it's an under. But the under's 40, so under 46. Probably San Diego State always with a good defense. I think this is a good under game. San Jose State 24 against Nevada, over under 45. Nevada, weak offense, a W team against an under team in San Jose State. The line's a bit high for me, 24, after what they did with Fresno State. So I just don't have the stomach to take San Jose State here. Their quarterback just isn't in sync. They're just not scoring, and they're an under team. So I got to leave this game alone. You play it under because they'll probably shut out Nevada with a good defense, but I can't. I'm not laying 24 with them. So maybe under 51 to play. UCLA is 16.5 and now up to 66. It was 63, I believe, on Monday. UCLA at home. Stanford can score. We know how explosive UCLA is. 66. I think you go down to 60, 60s. UCLA will easily get in the 40s. Stanford should get you 20. So that's 65 to 70. All you need 60. If you were with me on Monday, then it's like a 58, which is even, even less. So definitely like the game over. As far as UCLA minus 10.5, Stanford has this weird offense. I think they can score. They did beat Notre Dame 15-14, but I don't buy. I'm not looking at Stanford with this. I just think Notre Dame's got a crappy offense. So that you got to ignore. You look at Stanford against, what did they play, Oregon or Washington? I know they played both of those in the North, and it was a pretty high scoring. Well, USC, they went high scoring. So look for this game to go over versus trying to mess around with the line. And last but not least, the Hawaii special, Wyoming 10-50. Wyoming's an under team. Hawaii's the Z team. Terrible defense. Both offenses are weak. This is an under game as far as I can see. Under 50. Hawaii just hasn't gotten going to the new coach and new quarterback. Wyoming is pretty conservative, play under games. So I look at this game under. So there you have it. Again, the free game, take Tennessee, Kentucky over, take Oklahoma, Iowa State under. And again, you're looking, that's why you understand the teams. So we know Iowa State's on Iowa. They're a vicious, low-scoring team. They run the ball, and they're at home. And you're not going to score a lot on. Oklahoma's not putting up a 50 in this game. And the same thing with Kentucky, Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama, putting up a 52 on them. And a key is the Florida game when Florida came back and made it like 38-35. So you can see Tennessee's defense, and they gave up 49 to Alabama, but everybody does. So you can see that's kind of what it is. And therefore, Tennessee's defense isn't strong enough to just shut them down. That's why it's hard to take the 5.5 in Tennessee, but the over at 62 is ridiculous. So there you go. Those are the free plays. Let's quickly look at tonight. Tampa Bay is now a 1.5-point favorite. Very interesting because they stink. Just a second. Okay, sorry, mixing business and pleasure. So, Tampa Bay goes to 1.5. That's why I was going to look at the line. So Tampa's 1.5, 45.5. So that line moved. Baltimore, somebody said Bateman was out, is not out. They also said Andrews was out. Let me look at that. Hey, Bobby. Yeah, I just did. You missed it. The free picks, Tennessee over and Iowa State under. And I got to go to NFL. Oh, I did play 2 games today, which I gave. I took Lou Lafayette and Utah tonight. That's my tonight play. All right, Tampa Bay or Baltimore. So I got Bateman probable, tackle probable, defensive back probable. So you can see with all the probables, it's a big game for Baltimore. Cornerback probable, Marcus Peters probable, Humphrey cornerback probable. Let's see, Gus Edwards questionable with the knee. Cleveland probable, the guard. Andrews questionable Thursday with the knee, which means he'll play. J.K. Dobbins, this guy's injury prone. And that's it. Tampa, let's see if Julio Jones is playing. I mean, this will be a shock if he is. The guy never plays. All right. Tampa Bay. Let's see how important the game is. Mumphrey Bunting's out with the quad. Winfield out with the concussion. A guard's out. Cornerback is out. Mike Evans probable if he doesn't drop a pass. Brate, the tight end's out. Cage, the wide receiver's out. Britt, the linebacker's out. Julio Jones, questionable. Oh, my God, he's not out. He's questionable. So he'll play his 2 plays and then get his money and then go. Let's see. Bernard out. So there's a lot of injuries on Tampa. And it looks like Bateman's playing, and then Andrews is probably going to play. So I have a real, maybe I could have stomached Tampa as a home dog. There's no way I can play Tampa as a home favorite. They can't beat anybody right now. You lost to Carolina. Now, let's do an exercise on backs against the wall. Yeah, Utah plays at Washington State. Should be a real good game. But we're betting on Rising to get the win. Sort of like how you bet Verlander to win because he's Verlander. You bet Rising to win because he's Rising and you're laying a point. Backs against the wall. So somebody's stealing my lines because that's what I use. And I heard a guy on the radio say, well, Tampa's backs against the wall. And I'm like, oh, where'd you get that from? But are their backs against the wall? No, not really. Their backs were against the wall against Atlanta after they lost 2 in a row. And they're 3-4. But the division's 3-4. So they're not, they don't have to win. They're still 3-4. They're losing. But, okay, they lost to, who the fuck did they lose to? The Jets? What did they? Let's look at the last. Week 6, Tampa Bay loses to Pittsburgh. You just lost to the worst team in the league, and you kind of had your back against the wall there, and then you lose to Carolina. So you've just lost 2 games in a row, but the 2 lousy teams. Your back was already against the wall because you lost to Green Bay. It's different when you lose to Green Bay and Kansas City. But when you lose to Pittsburgh, who got slaughtered by Buffalo with their backup quarterback, who the quarterback sucks anyway, and then you lose to Carolina with P.J. Walker, you're not a good team. It's like saying the Lions have the back against the wall at 1-6. No, their back's not against the wall. They just suck. You can never bet on the Lions. You can't bet on this team because it's not that their back's against the wall or they need the win. They don't need the win because they're 3-4 and Atlanta's 3-4. They don't need the win. However, you think I'll play hard because they lost the 2 games. Okay, I'll give you that. Had they been the home dog, I could have played it very small, but I don't trust them. Now that they're a home favorite again, I really don't trust them. I like Baltimore and a half, I think. Over under 45.5. What do we got? We got E teams. Baltimore's an even. So Baltimore is 24, give up 24, like the Cincinnati game. Tampa Bay's an under team because they don't freaking score. And I don't know that they give up 21 to Carolina. They give up 20 to Pitt. So they're not giving up a lot of points. But as I just mentioned, there's a few injuries to them. And so I'm just really, questioning that. And then, so what do you have? So that's kind of my point. Are they good enough to have their backs against the wall and win? And again, the back's not against the wall. If Atlanta was 6-2 and they were 3-3 or 3-4, their backs against, they must win. That's backs against the wall. They do not have their backs against the wall because they're still in first place at 3-3 or 3 and what are they? This is week 8. So they're 3-4 with Atlanta. Their back's not against the wall. They don't have to win. They want to win because they just sucked against Pitt and Carolina. But then you say to yourself, they just lost to Pitt and Carolina. I mean, it's like Green Bay. They just lost to the Giants and the Jets and Washington now. Green Bay just lost 3 in a row. Okay, after losing to the Giants, they should have beat the Jets, but they didn't. And then after that, they should have beat Washington, and they didn't. They're not a good team, and you can see the offensive line problems. Tampa is not a good team. They're terribly coached. Their offensive line sucks. They're not running the ball. Their receivers can't catch it. They don't have Gronk, and Julio Jones never plays. So they have the 2 guys, which are probably being double-teamed by the other team saying, yeah, let the rookie beat us. And by the way, he doesn't even know how to run the route, which is fucking up Brady because he's expecting it to be where Gronk would go, but he's not. And Brate, who's the good tight end, he's not playing. So I don't know what Tampa's going to do to turn it around and light it up against a pretty decent Baltimore team. Mahomes kind of ran on them a little bit. They lost to Rodgers. They lost to P.J. Walker. I don't know if he ran. Pittsburgh did run on them. Why am I bringing that up? Because Trubisky ran on him, right? You got Lamar Jackson, the best running back who plays quarterback in the league, right? So he's going to run on him. And they can't stop him because they couldn't stop freaking Mitch Trubisky and Pickett from running. How are they going to stop Lamar Jackson? So now it becomes, well, we think Tampa will get better. We think their backs are against the wall because we don't really understand the terminology and what it really is. So therefore, we're just going to say it. Well, we know they need the game. They needed the game against Pittsburgh. They lost 2 in a row. They beat Atlanta. How they beat Atlanta, I don't know. Then they go ahead and they play Pitt in a game they needed. They should have won. They lose. Now, okay, we lost to Pitt. We're going to beat Carolina. They don't even score against Carolina. It's 21-3 to Carolina. What makes you think this team's any good that even if their backs are against the wall, they can win the game? They're not good enough to win. The coach doesn't work. The offensive line doesn't work. They're not running the ball, so there's no balance. Brady has 2 new receivers that never played before. That is not going to help him. Okay, he throws to Evans and Godwin, and that's about all he's got. And they're going to get a little bit of points. They can't stop a running quarterback like a Lamar Jackson or a Kenny Pickett Trubisky combination. They couldn't stop Mahomes from scrambling around. So you tell me how Tampa wins the game, because I don't know how they win. I don't know we're the better team. Yes, I get teams get upset. They lost a few games, but every time they've lost a few games, they just keep losing, just like Green Bay. I wouldn't bet on Green Bay, and I won't bet on Tampa Bay here. Maybe as a home dog, maybe they would keep the game close. I like Baltimore in 7.5, to tell you the truth. I'm not going to play it. Nick, don't look at it. I'm not going to put it up. Not getting posted. I quote with the professor here. He said in the past, you don't fuck with the king. And I agree with you. Well, you don't bet against Brady when he's the king. Like now I would say I would never bet against Georgia, and I'd have a hard time betting like Penn State, Ohio State. I am not touching Penn State. It's either Ohio State or the over. I'm not fucking with them. I'm not fucking with Georgia. I did fuck with Alabama and got away with it with Tennessee, but I did play it over. If the team was smoking, I would agree with you, Bobby, but they look like crap. How can you bet 10? Now, if they're a home dog, maybe they can stay within 7. They couldn't stay within 7 from Carolina, so they're not the king right now. If this is a Super Bowl, I'm betting Brady. If this is a playoff game, I'm betting Brady, right? When he beat Green Bay and he beat New Orleans and they went and won the Super Bowl, that was a whole different team. He had Gronk, he had offense and defense. I wasn't going to bet against him, and I didn't in the playoffs. That's a totally different animal. But just because Brady's on the team, this is not a good team right now. It's not coached well. There's no balance. I don't know where the hocus pocus comes and all of a sudden say the magic words and Tampa lights up Baltimore. I mean, this is like they didn't light up Pitt and they didn't light up Carolina. What makes you think they're going to light up Baltimore? So Brady being the king doesn't apply here. The king is probably, if I look at this list, the king's probably, I don't know if there is one in the pros. Maybe it would be Joe Burrow. Maybe it would be Mahomes. Maybe you don't want to fuck with, like, I didn't play the Niners last week, even though they're a home dog, because I wasn't going to bet against Mahomes. And I didn't take Buffalo against them because I didn't want to bet against Mahomes. So let's say it's Mahomes. So that's my point. You don't want to bet against the best. Let's put it this way. I won't bet against Verlander in the World Series, right? You either bet him or you bet the game under. If the other ace goes and it's Verlander, you just play under. And I would hope in the World Series they let him pitch 200 pitches, because what are you saving the guy for? Sorry, it's 100 pitches. You got to leave. That's the fucking World Series. What are you saving me for? So that's my point there. So I'm looking at that. I don't know how you bet Tampa tonight. I really don't. Over under 45. Baltimore is a pretty good scoring team. Tampa's got the good under, but they won't score. Not hocus pocus. So I really don't know how you take Tampa plus 4.5. I think the only way you can bet the game's Baltimore in 7.5. They should keep it close or win the game. Tampa is not playing well, so you cannot. They're not the king right now, Bobby. Bateman's playing. If the tight end, let's just put it this way: if Andrews plays, I'd take Baltimore in 7.5. Let's leave it at that. Is UL Lafayette a strong pick tonight? Well, they're a pick. I mean, they're not a 21 unit lock, but because the new quarterback's 10-1 and they're playing well and they're getting points from a weak Southern Miss team, yes, I definitely would play them. I got it. You make great points. Okay, thank you, Bobby. I mean, you're right. There's teams you don't want to fuck with. It's not Tampa right now. It's not this Brady team, and that's what you got to adjust to. If Brady was the king, he never would have lost to Pitt. He never would have lost to Carolina. How did he lose to P.J. Walker? That tells me he's not the king. So therefore, there's a new king. It's like when I find Utah and Rising, and I'm betting Utah because of Rising tonight. Is that tonight? Yeah, I'm betting Utah because the king's there, right? Rising's the king. I'm betting Utah laying 1, and it's going to be a dogfight against a good Washington State defense. A lot of field goals, but I'm not betting it over. So yes, you have to keep an eye on that, and I am. But in this situation, Brady is not the king anymore. Not right now. Maybe in 3 weeks. Maybe he lights up Baltimore and they win 37-0, and then they go and they beat. Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans. Maybe he lights up New Orleans, and now they're starting to play. Now, yes, I won't bet against them, but losing to Pitt, who's probably the worst team in the league beside the Lions, and then losing to Carolina with P.J. Walker and McCaffrey out, You want to call that a good team? That's not the king. That's how you define, so the back against the wall was against Pittsburgh and then against Carolina. So there was no way the back was against the wall for those teams. So therefore, if it was going to be, if they were going to win, they'd have won. They'd have pounded Carolina, and you can't tell me a good team. All right, so in the first 2 minutes of the game, Evans drops a touchdown, right? 60-yard pass right in his hands. He drops it. You're telling me that killed them? That they were done after 3 minutes of the game because Evans drops a touchdown, and then they're all done. And you're telling me their backs against the wall then, and now they're going to beat Baltimore? No chance. They'll be lucky to beat them. I don't like that. It doesn't apply here. Yes, they lost 2 in a row, but when you lose to Green Bay and Kansas City, okay, who doesn't? Everybody loses to Mahomes, but when you lose to Pitt and Carolina, there's a problem. You're not a good team, and then you don't have a back. Like the Lions, they're back against the wall every week, but they lose every week, so you can't go there. What about VT tonight in Washington State and those 3 games? I already talked about them. I gave you Utah and Lou Lafayette tonight. Those are the 2 plays. Free play is Tennessee over and Iowa State under. And again, tonight I would not. Now that Tampa's the favorite, and really I have no idea why they went favorite. I have a -3 because they're at home. My initial thought, but I'm not sitting there going, "Oh, okay, they're a great team." But this is like betting on the Lions. Right? The Lions are getting 3.5 from Miami. Their backs are against the wall because they've won 1 game. They've lost 4 or 5 games in a row. Would you bet the Lions? Their backs are against the wall. They need to win. I wouldn't bet them against. I would take Georgia, Tennessee, Utah, UCLA, USC, Oak State, TCU against, and I lay points against the Lions. That's how bad the Lions are. That's true. The Lions have had their backs against the wall since the 1958 team, right? Well, Ford's problem is he's cheap. He doesn't understand winning. He understands money. So he looks at it as a business, not as a sport team. He doesn't understand competition. He's a socialist. By the way, Ford built cars for the Nazis in the 30s. Okay. So this is who you're dealing with, a Nazi lover. So be careful with that. So he's always never hired good coaches, and then he's never kept his players. So he gets them cheap through the draft, and then when they re-up, and look at Chris Spielman, for example, guy's an all-star, plays the 3 or 4 years, goes to renegotiate the next contract, they let him go because they will never re-up the next player. That's why they're never any good. So if you come here, you're always rebuilding because you can't keep. Look at Darius Slay. He's on Philadelphia. Well, what the fuck? Why didn't you sign him? He's an all-pro. Because that's what Ford does. They never sign it. And they always take a coach that's never coached before because they don't have to pay him. They're paying this guy probably $500,000 because he'll get the experience, but he'll look like an idiot. And let's go for it on 4th down. So that's the problem with the Lions. We will be in 2025 rich off silver and gold, and the fucking Lions will still have their backs against the wall. Yeah. I was watching those videos, and I'm just, what I did is my girlfriend in Romania sends me a picture of stuff and says it's very, very expensive. And I did a thing on what the silver and gold price is in a few countries, right? All right, just a second. So my girlfriend in my girlfriend in Russia, I said 1 ounce of gold equals $102,000 in rubles, and an ounce of silver is $1,202 in rubles. Then my friend in Ukraine, I sent the same thing to her, and it was somewhere around here. Where is it? An ounce of gold is 61,000 hryvnias, and an ounce of silver is 715 hryvnias. So you can see if I gave her an ounce of gold, she gets 61,000 hryvnia. But what is the hryvnia? It's still all in US dollars, but you can see the difference. And then my friend in Romania, an ounce of silver is 94 lei, and an ounce of gold is 8,000 lei. They're only 4-to-1 difference. So the point was to say, look, they're bitching about prices, and to answer my friend's Canadian question yesterday on is there inflation, that's what it is, right? The prices, the only way you know is if the prices are going up. My friend in Romania is sending me pictures saying, look, everything's getting really expensive there. That's Romania, that's Europe, that's China and Japan, and guess where it's coming? Right here. And that's like right now before the election, I noticed gas dropped and Biden's trying to take, there's no recession just for the election. Now watch when the election's over, everything will go through the roof, because the biggest thing that they're supposed to do is keep the inflation down. Don't print the money. And that's what Biden does. So he's screwed anyway, but we'll see what happens. So go fill up with gas before the election. Yeah, I think the silver and the gold markets blow up, the derivatives. And again, trying to explain derivatives to people is really hard. But yes, it's paper, not physical. And that's what I explained yesterday. But anyway, yeah, we'll be in good shape. But the biggest key is we won't be in dollars. And so therefore, when our dollar goes down and it'll be replaced by a new dollar, we won't lose. We'll have gained it in the gold and silver. So that's the biggest thing, is to get out of dollars so you don't lose value in it. And you got to get out of stocks because they're in dollars and they're going to go down because people will need money and they're going to sell their stocks. And it's amazing. These portfolio managers or financial planners, it's 60% stock, 40% bonds, 0 gold. And that's what they tell everybody. So people will listen to their financial planner. But if I walk up to them as an economist, they don't listen to me. They don't. Who are you? Why should I listen to you? I tell them the same thing about intermittent fasting and avocados, and they don't listen. And I just scratch my head going, what do I look like? I got my head up my ass or what? So it's just I just go, fine, then don't come to me when your dollar crashes and you don't own any gold, silver, and I told you so. I won't say I told you so, but you don't come to me for anything. Bobby, yeah, yesterday was a hell of a class. Thank you, Bobby. Well, I never know how long I'm going to go, although today I got to end soon. I got a lunch date. But basically, that's why it's live. So you come up with a question and I answer it. The kid from Canada had all the questions, so I answered them. And that's why I do the live show. And I don't pay attention to the clock. We've gone almost 2 hours. Initially, I would never do a 2-hour show because I'm afraid people aren't going to watch it and look at it. But with college football, it's different because I go game by game, right? And I go game by game. So just go in the schedule where your game is. If you just, what do you like in Ohio State, Penn State? It should be in the first 20 minutes. Go to the Ohio State, Penn State game. You'll hear my analysis on it. So that's what I try to do. The only thing is you just don't know what games I'm actually playing versus the games that I like this game. Well, obviously I'm playing Iowa State. It's the free game. And I'm playing Tennessee over, but those aren't even my locks. So again, I have 4 locks out there, and I got, I think 4 locks. Now, when I say 4 locks, I got 4 teams locked, and really that's what you do. And that's really, I'm playing with the gentleman, and we're not doing the 10-team teaser. He's doing a 2-team teaser. and he's betting X and I get 20%. So I'm giving him my top 3 or 4 plays. He bets them and then he pays me on Fridays. And so far I've gotten paid every week, and that works too, because it's hard, the 10 teamers. Carter wants to play 10, 12 team teasers. The problem is it's very hard to win them. We keep missing by a game, but it's extremely difficult to hit all 10. You're going to have your San Jose State. Last week was New England, which finished a lot. So I'm trying to stay okay, where's my loser? Okay, let's try to stay away from that. Because I could have stayed away from San Jose State had I really thought about it, but I was just picking 10. And I could have stayed away from New England had I known Jones was quarterback, and we did trap it because of Jones. And this week, I guess Jones is quarterbacking again. I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? So anyway, Phil, I don't chat much, but I enjoy the show and don't mind when it's long at all. Makes my workday go quicker. Well, I'm glad you can listen to me at work. I don't care if you chat or not. That's not the point, but it's the idea that it is a live show. If you want to chat and you want to have a quiet, like if you bet and you want to know who do I like in the Tennessee game, or, who do I like in the 49ers and the Rams, you can ask me that question live, where you can't, unless you go online, get my email and email me, then you can ask that. But otherwise, it's hard. So anyway, it's www.teaserking.com. You get my email there if you want to buy. You go and just pay with PayPal. It's about it. So it should be, I got a lot of college games. This is huge college week. Tonight, I'm not betting anything, but I would say to take Baltimore in the 7.5, as long as Andrews plays the tight end. I don't see how Tampa Bay can beat anybody. This does not look like the same Tampa team. I don't like the coach. The coach makes a big difference. And I just think it's bad coaching and a bad offensive line, and they just don't look right. How can they be favored? So again, this is a league where there's only 1 or 2 teams that can be favored. Maybe Buffalo, maybe Kansas City, maybe Philadelphia. That's it. Everybody else is just grouped into this. They all suck. So anybody that's favored, you just take the dog, like I did last week. Giants, Jets, Seattle, 3 locks, 3 winners, just teasing dogs that have been hot, because the teams they're playing, you can't count on them to win because they weren't Buffalo, Kansas City, or Philadelphia. So we'll talk pros tomorrow. Again, www.teaserking.com. 4 college locks, plus you got the free game. So you can play right there. It's 4. You can play a 6-team teaser with the 6 teams if you want. All right, everybody, have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Again, email me. The email's on teaserking.com, and just email me. And I check all the time, where I literally have to come on to onto YouTube, on to do a show to talk to you that way. All right, everybody, have a good day. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy.